A
Thank you.
very warm good evening to all of you. I, Aditi Singh, on behalf of entire IDG family, welcome you to the 106th IDG session. It is indeed an honor and absolute privilege to have Mrs. KK Shailaja with us today. Colloquially known as Shailaja teacher and virus slayer, Ma'am is an Indian politician and former health minister of Kerala. And today, she will be talking about coping with health crisis in rural India, takeaways from Kerala model. Ma'am, we thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule and gracing us with your presence. We are overwhelmed to be hosting a person of your eminence and stature. I now invite Krishna Tiwari to introduce the guest for all the attendees.
Thank you, Aditi. Welcome, everybody, to this exciting 106th IDG session. Today, we have with us as our guest someone who has led by example in these challenging times and has been appreciated the world over for this. We have with us Mrs. KK Shailaja, ma'am, an eminent politician and former health minister of Kerala. She currently serves as the member of Legislative Assembly representing Matanur constituency in 15th Kerala Legislative Assembly. Mrs. Shailaja has received international attention for her leadership in tackling COVID-19 pandemic in Kerala. She was invited by the United Nations to participate in a panel discussions on United Nations Public Service Day 2020 for her brilliant efforts to fight COVID-19 in her state. The BBC News featured her amongst a list of Asian women corona fighters. Ma'am was also featured by Vogue magazine as a Vogue warrior. Mrs. Shailaja had also received a lot of praise for her effective handling of the Nipah virus epidemic in 2018 during her tenure as Kerala's health minister. Recently, she has been awarded the prestigious Central European University Open Society Prize in recognition of her commitment to public health service. She has authored 2 books and has also worked in Sivapuram High School in Kannur as a science teacher earlier. We all have heard of her exemplary work, especially in this pandemic, which has become a case study in various reputed publications. Today, ma'am shall be enlightening us on coping with health crisis in rural India, the takeaways from the Kerala model. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Aditi, the moderator for the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Krishna. This session is entirely question and answer based. Therefore, I sincerely request the audience to keep their microphones open and start posting their questions to ma'am through the chat box. Ma'am, beginning with the session, I would like to ask a question that I guess most of us wish to know. How did Kerala prepare itself to fight against the novel coronavirus, and what was the reason behind the Kerala's prompt response to it at the initial stage?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to express my happiness to participate in this discussion because yours is a well-known university in our country, and several scholars passed out or of the production of your university, and we are proud of them. And to your question, that we can say that the early preparedness is the most important part when a crisis arises, and also to take responsibilities and decisions bravely. Don't be afraid in front of a crisis like this, and to take our responsibility. And we should have reasonable at that time, and that is the most important thing. We have a previous experience on Nipah virus here. That is, Nipah virus occurred in India, in Kerala. I think it is in 2018, in a remote village of one of our districts, Kozhikode district. And at that time, we were not aware of that kind of viruses. And only one family members, 4 members of a family got severe illness, severe cough and fever, etc. And one of them succumbed to death immediately, and the all other members were fighting hard to save their life in hospital. And people were astonished what is happening there. And we sent the samples to Mangalore virology lab, and we cannot believe at that time that they confirmed it to Nipah virus. At that time, I didn't even heard. I heard about Nipah, but I didn't expect that Nipah virus will come to Kerala. That was a severe thing, but I didn't know more about Nipah at that time. But at once when I know that it is Nipah, I searched in Google network and I find at that time I understood that this virus occurred in Malaysia first. Malaysia, place called Sungai Nipah, and that is why the virus get that name, Nipah virus. And I found that it is a deadly virus, a newly emerged zoonosis, and there is no medicine for it. There is no vaccination for it, and the mortality rate is too high. Mortality rate is there, and I feel somewhat afraid for a moment. But there is no time to be afraid on that. We have to took some decision at first. Then I rushed to that district Kozhikode, and at once I convened a meeting there with the higher officials of health sector, and I called my director of health service there and my health secretary. Everyone assembled there, and we took immediate decisions. And at that time, the media told me that from that village, the villagers are ready to go outside. They are packing up and they are escaping from that village to other places because when they heard the virus is Nipah, that is the second day we announced it is Nipah virus after the confirmation from the National Virology Institute Pune. When the news came in the newspapers at that time, the people started to flee from the village. They were very much afraid to stay there. But that is not a good thing. At once, I think that if they enter other village, if they were the carrier of Nipah virus, the other village also will be affected. And we should have to open Warfield at that place also. Instead of one, we have to open so many war fields. Then at once I started going to that village to give awareness to the common people, but the official didn't allow me. They said that you cannot go, the minister should not go. If I got the virus and something happened to me, and who will lead from inside in front, and they will go, they said that. But I didn't agree because the people only believe if the elected representatives will be there. Otherwise, they will believe that the officials will is confusing them, and that kind of thinking occur there. And I decided to go there, and I went there, and I addressed the people. Not only me, but also the experts are with me. I'm not an expert, I'm only a teacher, and I cannot say more about that virus and that kind of thing at that time. And I took the experts also with me, scientists and other experts. And they also explained how this virus will transfer from one human being to other. It is not a airborne disease only through contact. Airborne, we can say it airborne in the sense that 2 meter distance the virus can travel through the droplets or samples coming out of the virus carrier man. And we explained that standing far distance away from the patient, there is nothing to afraid, nothing to fear on that, and please stay there. And we contained that virus in the short space, in the short span of time. We the closing that village doesn't means to abandon the people. We should have to pull everything there, medicine, food, in everything, whatever is their need, we should have to supply them there, and we prepared for that at once. And we succeeded in containing Nipah virus. Only 18 people caught the virus, and 16 succumbed to death, and 2 escaped from the virus. And that experience is with us when we know about the COVID virus. In the COVID case also, when I happened to read that a potential virus is spreading in Wuhan, China, I felt something about the Nipah experience. And at once I called my health secretary and we have a discussion. I told him that some people, some students are there. They are studying in Wuhan University. Malayali students are studying in Wuhan University for medical. In the medical university, they are studying there. I remembered that some students returned back from Wuhan and came to me previously for some registration of their degree in Kerala. And at once I noted that, and I told my secretary that definitely some students will return from Wuhan to Kerala. They may be carrier of virus. We should have to act properly. At once we called our RRT rapid response team, and we formed our control room there and everything we arranged, and we started training, mock drill. We started the mock drill. Whether COVID will came or not, we will not know at that time. But we arranged some trainings, and we have a very good tracing team in the airport, and we were waiting eagerly whether anyone is coming from Wuhan or not. That definitely happened after 1 week. It happened that some students from Wuhan returned in Cochin airport, and because of the team, we got that the virus carriers, and we isolated the 3 students from Wuhan for COVID-19, the novel coronavirus, and we started our action on COVID-19 virus, and that is going on. We cannot stop this virus like Nipah, because Nipah is occurred in Kerala itself. Kerala, from the forest, some bats. Bats are the carriers of the Nipah virus, and it occurred in our place, and we can contain that thing by closing that village. But COVID is not like that. COVID occurred in other country and it traveled throughout the world. When the human beings are highly mobile and they are moving from one country to other country, and it is spreading throughout the world, and we cannot stop its coming. And you know that the large number of expatriates are there in Kerala. Malayalis went to each and every part of the world in search of job and livelihood, etc. They were there, and they will definitely return from other countries also. And we kept our this tracing team, the health team in the airport even after the three people incident. And again from Italy, from France, and from USA, people began to return Kerala, and from every country's passengers, we got Nipah virus. That is why we had a long drawn pandemic, and now also we are fighting against the pandemic. Without fear, we should have to act. Fear is there, but we should have to act boldly on such kind of infectious disease or such a pandemic.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was really an interesting and life-saving approach. Our next question is sent to us by Rudra Nildhar. India is a country full of various mythos where fiction is more acceptable and believable than facts, and once entrenched, such superstitious beliefs often hinder them from receiving medical aid. How to tackle ignorance coupled with superstition?
Yes, our country is a democratic country, and we got independence in 1947, as we know. But afterwards, we cannot reduce these kind of superstitious beliefs or this ignorance, etc., properly. I think you all remember that our first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, when we got independence, he called a meeting, arranged a meeting of the scientists in the country, and Nehru, in Nehru's speech, you can read it. Nehru said that all countries are highly superstitious or like that, but our country is more than normally conservative. The conservatism that leads to superstitions and ignorance, etc. Nehru said that our society is more than normally conservative, India. There are so many religions, so many castes, etc. And religion and castes are, we cannot say that they are all superstitious, but it is a small crossing border that when we cannot predict when the religious beliefs or other beliefs may change it to a superstition. When it becomes superstitious, we should have to act. Jawaharlal Nehru asked the scientists to inculcate scientific temper in the society, Indian society. But I think that doesn't happen properly. The superstitions are there. The Chova effect in horoscope. If the nakshatra is belongs to Chova, it is not good for a girl to get married. That kind of beliefs are there. False beliefs are there. I always used to ask to my colleagues and I am working in women's organization before I become the minister, and every time I will ask the women that how the planet like Chova, the Mars or any planet become how they can intervene in human life here. That's impossible. That's a false belief. But people are believing like that. During a pandemic and during this kind of a situation, the superstitions are really an obstacle, you know. In Kerala, it is lesser compared to other states of India. But in Kerala also there is the superstition. I have to face several that kind of incidents during these 5 years when I was health minister. And you all know diphtheria. It is a very serious, very cruel thing. And when I want to get all the children vaccinated for diphtheria, in some part of Kerala, there are some groups that they didn't believe in vaccination. They were against this. Only 60% of the persons are vaccinated there. And if we got more than 90% of the population, that is children's population, get vaccinated, then only we can stop diphtheria. Otherwise, that will continue in that place. And I went there. I arranged a very good convention, a meeting, and I called every religious leaders in that place, and I asked them also to participate in that and have a very good discussion on this superstition. And at last, they agreed that they will also help to vaccinate the children in their places. And that way, we got more than 90% vaccination at that time. This is the fate of Kerala. And how can we think the other remote places in UP or like that? There are so many superstitions, ignorance about that, and no proper facilities of healthcare system, etc. are there. And we should have to fight against these superstitions in India. I am asking you that you are students and graduates and post-graduating students, so everyone, you should have to fight against this kind of superstitions in future, and we should have to make the society scientific, more scientific, and we should have to inculcate scientific temper in persons. Then only we can face this kind of pandemic. During this pandemic, I think you noticed that the cow dust and other thing become. Some people believed that we can use the cow dust and other thing for the treatment for COVID-19. And how can it possible? You think? And that kind of beliefs are there in India. It is we are astonishing that in our constitution, our country is a very good democratic country, but democracy doesn't mean this kind of superstitions, etc. That we should have to think about.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Next question is from Gathaji. How can the district administrations take more responsibility and display better thought leadership in charting out health policies?
You mean district administrations? Yes, the policy should be drafted by the government itself. You know, we have so many health policies here. Central government, I think several times central government drafted new health policies. In all health policies, we are addressing the that we should have to look after the poor people. Our priority should be the poor people, and we should have to help them. But it is not happening actually. You know, in Kerala we are trying our best. There are some difference in Kerala because from 1957 onwards, I mean 1956, the linguistic states are formed in our country after independence. We have the states according to the language, and in 1957 there was election in legislature assembly in Kerala, and left front government was elected at that time, first Kerala government, a democratic government. And that the very first Kerala government drafted some policies on health, education, etc. And at that time, that government decided to decentralize the healthcare system, education system, and everything to the poor people. I think you didn't know about the Kerala or the village, all the villages. What is the system of governance there before independence? I think you have very good reading habit, and most of the students may understand about that. That the landlordism was there at that time, means no citizen have any right on his piece of land. All the land was related to the landlords there. We are calling in Malayalam Janmi, that landlords. And they have some, it is not written, but they have some rights on the land. They are saying that God gave that rights to them, and they are powerful to evict the poor people from the piece of land where they are living. And the first government, the Kerala government, passed the act in assembly to giving stay to the eviction, and we have Woodland Reform Act after that. After these acts, eviction free situation, the people enjoyed the freedom to hold some piece of land, and that made the identity somehow what powerful, and they got some identity, and they began to teaching their students, their childrens. They have government schools, etc. And that way in Kerala become more humanitarian, and also in the human development index Kerala is the first in our country. And that was a continuous process in Kerala, continuous process up to 2021, and we got something. Some other states also done like this, but it is not complete. In remote villages, again, I am coming to UP or Bihar. In remote villages, I think they cannot own a piece of land, the poor people, working class, and they are suffering the landlordism again, and the casteism and differentiation according to the caste, untouchability was there. That kind of evils are there. And you are asking about the district administration. The district administration should act, but the state itself have a very good policy. We are every time we are renewing our health policy here. And this time also, last time also, when I was minister, I renewed the health policy of Kerala and included several new things in our policy. And in our new policy, we intended to strengthen the primary health systems in Kerala, grassroots level, to improve the infrastructure, and also to make that, to transform the primary health system as people friendly and also technologically advanced. We are trying to do so. We are converting the PHC to family health centers. But the district administration is most important. In the COVID-19 pandemic fight, the district administration done a very good job in Kerala. All the district collectors, IAS officers were in charge of each and every district, and under the leadership of collectors, there is a very good team. And the DMO, district medical officer, revenue officials, and other all kinds of every stakeholders, every department joined together under the leadership of district administrator, and they worked hard and working. They are giving responsibility to grassroots level people, and they are evaluating everything in each and every hour they were looking at it. And that way district administration can involve in this kind of activities, but we should give some responsibilities and some power to act, if the government is not giving any power to the district administration, they cannot do anything. We should trust the capacity of our officials. We should appreciate them and we should ask them. We should evaluate and monitor everything. Government. Then only the district administration can act on it. And if we convey this thing to all the district administrations throughout India, they can do so many things. We should help them by assisting by funds also. Money, economic assistance should also give to that district administration.
Thank you, ma'am. Pratyush Nigam is asking how Kerala has become almost free of waterborne diseases and malaria, how to resolve the tussle between center and states over Ayushman Bharat.
Yes, central government is announcing so many things, and in Kerala we are always taking that thing also. And in Kerala we are not imitating the thing what central government is announced, but we are making as it according to our situation in Kerala. Without the central government's announcement, we are also declaring so many things here. As you know, not only for the malaria, but also according to the Sustainable Development Goals declared by United Nations, UN, we also declared 13 goals here. That when I came to office as a health minister in 2016, my health secretary was a very active man, one Mr. Raju Sadanandan IAS, and I discussed with him how can we reduce these infectious diseases other than seasonal. Also, there are some other infectious diseases. Also, tuberculosis is there, and malaria is there, cholera is there. So many diseases are there. And I asked my secretary that what is the method or how can we reduce these things? And my secretary said that UN announced some sustainable development goals already up to 2030. There are some aims. And we should also announce some goals for Kerala itself. And I asked him to just to convene a meeting at once. And the experts, we gathered the experts in front of us and we discussed it together and we declared some goals. And one of the goal is to eliminate malaria, and the other is to eliminate tuberculosis, TB, and the other is to eliminate leprosy, and one is to reduce the child mortality rate, and other is maternal mortality rates. And we organized some teams for that. There are efficient doctors in our team, and we should have to give them responsibilities and to examine. And we have very good teams for each and everything, and we have a very good result out of that. After 4 years, when we examined, the child mortality rate reduced from 12 to 6, below 6. Someone is calculated as central government is calculated it is 4.4, but we are thoroughly examining here. In some part it is 6, and we are calling it as 6, and it is below 6 definitely. From 12 to 6, 12 out of 1,000 birth to 5 or 6 out of 1,000 birth. And that is the achievement because of the teamwork. In the same way, we acted on malaria and cholera. We are cleaning or supplying very good drinking water. We are examining the drinking water each and every time. It is not completed because of the high population density in Kerala. It is thickly populated. People are living nearby, and if one family is well in Kerala, you know, each and every houses have a well on their own. And in some part, one family's well is here, and the next place, the other family's the sanitation tank or sanitary tanks or like is there, and the contamination of water is happening. But every time we are examining whether the water is contaminated or not, and we are trying to supply the water in a centralized way in towns and very good water supply systems. Here, I think you understand about KIFBI, Kerala Infrastructure Investment Fund Board. There were so many discussions about that. I am not explaining. But from KIFBI, we got some 10,000 crores to ensure water supply in Kerala. And each and every constituency get from 50 crores to 150 crores like that for water supply alone. In my constituency also, I got 80 crores of rupees for water supply. My old constituency. My new constituency get 119 crores of rupees for water supply. It is going on, work is going on. Before that, we are examining water and giving very good water. To clear malaria, the most important thing is to supply very good water supply, and also mosquito reduction is most important for this kind of infectious diseases. And we have a very good campaign, that Arugya Jagrata campaign for mosquito reduction, and that is also going on, and that also gave a very good result on that. And we are working on non-communicable diseases also, and we got an award for non-communicable disease control from UN, United Nations, for 2018-19 activities. And that part also we are controlling these diabetic and other things. For malaria, we have a special group, and we are working on that, and we are controlling malaria. The indigenous malaria completely we finished it, and there is no indigenous malaria here. Last year, case we got a case that is an exported case. Sorry, an imported case, not indigenous. Indigenous malaria is not there in Kerala now. That is a very good achievement.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We have Rudrani Udhar, a member of the IDG family. He would like to ask a question to you.
Yes.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good
Very
evening.
honored to have you here. My question to you is, after the Namboodiripad government, the policies in Kerala have been focusing largely on human development. In your opinion, how much did those policies help in tackling the COVID waves, and how?
The first part, the first part of Nambudiri governments.
After Namboodiripad government, the main governmental policies in Kerala mostly focus on human development. My question is, how did those policies help in tackling the COVID waves, and how?
Yes, I think you are that part. Something happened to the sound. What policy you are mentioning? Sorry.
Ma'am, I'm referring to the human development policies of the Kerala
Oh,
government.
yeah. I understand. Yes, that policy helped Kerala very much. And from that is the basement. We can definitely say so, because of the left ideology, we are considering the humanitarian policies. I explained about the landlordism and other thing. In India, we are facing not only landlordism. According to us, I think you are belongs to different policies or different political opinion, and that is not a bad thing, and that is a good thing. And according to us, as means the left politicians, we are facing not only landlordism but also the new imperialist ideologies like consumerism, etc., giving importance to the high level people and not giving equality to the society. We are always explaining that our democracy is not complete if we are not giving equal importance to the poor people. And even in the time of at the time of Greek philosophers, there was a very good definition on democracy. I think Plato or Socrates, I didn't remember properly, but it is from the Greek philosophers that democracy doesn't mean the accommodation of Tom or Harry to the office. It means perfect equality in opportunity. That is the definition. That should be the definition of democracy now also. If we want to be a democratic country, the egalitarian concept is very much, we want that. And that thing we applied when we started our governance system in Kerala, the democratic governance system in Kerala. That is why we started the Land Reform Act. And Land Reform Act supplied not only lands but the dignity to the poor people. They can stand still, they can wear clothes, they can send their children to school, and that is a very good thing. And in the first cabinet itself, there was they helped minister was a prominent man called Dr. A.R. Menon, and he started some public health system, that the health system should be distributed to public, not only for the rich people, but also the poor workers, agricultural workers, etc. And he started to build public hospitals, public health hospitals in Kerala. Kerala wasn't first at that time to start this kind of thing. After that, our democratic government in India started this kind of public health system throughout the world. Sorry, throughout India. But what is the situation in India now? In Kerala, we started PHCs in each and every panchayat, and we started looking after the people there. But in other parts of our country, there are so many big hospitals in other states, but in grassroots level, what is the fate? There is an example in contemporary era, or last year in Bihar. More than 150 children died out of hypoglycemia in a village. And if there is a single or a simple sub center or health center there, the children will not die, because hypoglycemia we can address it as early as possible if we were able to understand it and give some even sugar or something like that at once. Then the people will the children will recover. That much facilities was not there in the village. That is the fate. In Kerala, we started from this thing, sub-centers in each and every wards. In every wards, we can find a sub-center, a junior health nurse, and also a junior health inspector. They were there. People can run to them and they can diagnose everything early possible, and they can send the people to the higher hospitals if they want. We were examining, and central government declared these social health accredited social health activities, ASHA workers. But these ASHA workers are functioning well in Kerala. But in other state, what is the duty of ASHA workers? Only they are going and taking some pregnant woman to hospital, and then they will get 100 rupees as honorarium. Other times they are getting nothing. When I came to, I became the health minister 2016, I found that the honorarium of the ASHA workers is 500 rupees. And they got 500 rupees as incentive also. Incentive only when they acted like this. And at once I intervened in that, our government intervened, and now the ASHA workers are getting more honorarium. Central government also increased some honorarium after this. And now they are getting 5,000 rupees honorarium, and Kerala increased the incentive more, and they are getting more than 6,000 rupees as incentive, and they are getting more than 10,000 rupees per month. Then we can give more responsibilities. We are giving to accredited social health activists more responsibilities. They are going each and every home and examining the people there. And that should be that kind of work was done after this EMS Namboodiripada's government, and that government's policy to give importance to the poor people or people-centered method, that helped us very much. Not only in 1957 and 1967, the Land Reform Act was passed, and in 1987, again we have some this kind of measures, and in I think that government which came in power in 1987, they started the Kudumbasri Ayalkootam self-help groups for women, and the total literacy program in 1990. That kind of activities helped us to decentralize the power and also distribution of money to the panchayat. Before the Panchayati Raj Nagarpalika Act, Kerala started this work earlier. That is the reason that we are in forefront in the humanitarian concepts.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Shreya would like to ask a question to you now.
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence today, ma'am. My question is, in light of the increasing cases of violence against doctors and medical practitioners, so ma'am, do you think a central law against such violence is required as being demanded by the Indian Medical Association, even if the Epidemic Diseases Act is currently in place? And if so, do you think the state laws which are against, like, which prevent such violence, which are against those violences, they are redundant or they are very much good to use?
You mean the domestic violence like that?
No, ma'am. Okay, like the Epidemic Act, the Epidemic Diseases Act, which is currently in place, which prohibit the violence which are being like the violence against doctors and medical practitioners. So IMA
That
is demanding the
yes.
central, as in the state laws which are in place are not very much put to use and they are not being very effective. So do you also
Yeah.
think there is a pressing necessity for central law?
Yeah, well, definitely we want something like that because the society is should understand. When I was minister, every time I was giving awareness to the society that you cannot act any kind of atrocities against the health team. If you have a complaint about them, please let me know as a minister. Let me know about that complaint, and I will act soon. And I will ask the police at that time to every time I ask the police to take some urgent activities on this kind of violence on doctor. This is a sensitive issue, and we are asking to make the hospitals as patient friendly. There are two edges for this sword. One is that the doctors sometimes the doctors and staff are not behaving properly to the villagers or the poor people, and they have complained on that. And the other side, the doctors and the other staffs are saying that the people are not behaving as decently. They are coming and they are putting some violence on us and like that. And that time I used to call the panchayat presidents and medical officers together and to act together in villages and in Taluk Lawak hospital everywhere. And but this thing I give more importance that no one can enter the hospital and no one can beat or any that kind of violence on our doctors or staff, and that is a criminal thing. And that is the thing, but we have to change the attitude in both sides also. One part the people's attitude, and other part the staffs and the officials attitude. Sometimes they are not getting good response from the officials, not only the doctors but in government offices. The people have the right to get good response from the government servants, but sometimes they are not getting. But that doesn't means the all citizen can enter in an office and they can put violence there like that. Violence is violence and it is criminal offense, even if in outside or inside office. That's a criminal offense, and we should have to prevent it. And it should be safe if some inaction of some laws on this.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We have Abin Alex with us, and he would like to ask a question to you.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Ma'am, my question is about something that happened recently. So, the central government had informed the Supreme Court that they will not be able to compensate the families of COVID victims in the Supreme Court
Yes.
with rupees 4 lakh, if my memory is correct. So, in your opinion, should the central and state governments be responsible to monetarily compensate each and every COVID victim, and is it possible to do that?
Yes, that is a difficult question because I cannot comment on the central government's policy decision or that can. But the actual thing is that we should have to help the poor people in the difficult situations. In Kerala, we declared 20,000 crores worth package for COVID these activities. And what did we do? We announced some packages on. We are supplying food kits for each and every families in COVID affected areas. Throughout Kerala, we are supplying food kits because of this lockdown and other thing. They are not able to sustain otherwise. And also we are supplying free medicine to all. That means all the poor families are getting proper medicine. The COVID treatment is totally free in Kerala, in government hospitals. In private hospitals, they should have to pay. Private hospitals also we intervened and we put some rate and some limitation on that rate also. And that kind of activities will help the poor people. We should have to help the poor in each and every time, but giving compensation to each and every families, that should be according to the financial conditions of our state or country. Whether we can afford or not, we should have to think about that. As a state, I think if central government is not helping on that, state could not afford that much of amount alone, because ours is a federal system, and all the most part of the share of the taxes are going to the center. Federal system means the state is the country is the union of states, state, and the most part of the income or the taxes are going to center, and center is distributing the share to government for administration through the projects and through the 5-year plan, and also the finance commission is coming each and every year to the state and studying, examining, and they are giving suggestions how much amount center should give to the state. But we are not getting, no states are getting proper amount, not say we cannot live with this much amount, and we cannot act on this. I think that our country is spending only 1% of the GDP in health sector, only 1% of the gross domestic product of our country to health sector. What shall we do with that amount? How can we maintain these hospitals or supply new equipments or building new hospitals and giving salaries to the staff? We cannot, and it is a meager amount. We should have to spend more than 10%. If it is 15 or 16%, some countries are spending more than 20% of the domestic product to the health sector. The health sector is the most important. Without health, we cannot do anything. That is the most important thing. And with that small amount, we cannot give compensation to each and every family state. But if central government is giving more money, we can do that. But central government, they should examine what is the most important thing: giving compensation to the family or saving the family by giving free treatment and everything to the family. That discussion is going on. I'm not expressing my opinion on that because the court is in one part and our central government is one part. Let us wait what is happening. And I want to say one thing also. Our democracy have several pillars, and judiciary is one of the pillar, and executive is the other pillar. And executive, judiciary, and legislature, everything should discuss each other. This thing, one thing cannot dominate on other. That thing will destroy democracy. But anyway, we should have to solve the problem of the poor family. That is the most important thing. And what's the method? We should find out it. We should make policy to save the poor people, to reduce the poverty. Poverty alleviation is the most important thing, and that we should have to do.
Thank you so much, ma'am. On that line, Sakshi Sharma is asking, pandemic has reflected on the importance of investment in public and health system. How do we put in place medium and long-term plans to improve the public health infrastructure, particularly in villages?
Yes, definitely. There is a saying now that the COVID-19 pandemic became a litmus test to the governance system throughout the world. And what is the system? And each and every part of the world is having going on discussions like the investment on public sector. And everyone is looking at Kerala, what is going on here. Not only Kerala, but so many places in the world. But they are looking, in India, they are looking at Kerala, what the Kerala had done in private sector previously and what is doing here this time. And investing in public health system, that is the most important thing. As I told you earlier, Kerala invested in public health system as much as we can in previous years. And the last government from 2016 to 2021, we had very good plans and mission on public health system. we launched a mission called Ardram in health sector. And through that mission, we tried to improve the public health system as much as we can. And the slogan of the Ardhram mission is, there are three slogans. One, as I told, one is to make it patient friendly. Each and every hospital is patient friendly. Second, to improve the technology. And third is to reduce out of pocket expenditure for the poor people. And, according to that mission, we decided to convert our primary health centers to family health centers. And in our primary health center, when in 2016, when I examined, there are primary health centers in each and every panchayat, but it functioned only up to noon. Afternoon, there was no one there in a primary health center, only one doctor and no laboratories. That was the condition. We want to change it. And we have a very good project on that, a master plan to change it to family health center. We decided to change the infrastructure. We invested more than 1.5 crores and up to 4 or 5 crores to change the infrastructure. And we insisted that in a primary health center, there should be a very good garden in front of the hospital. And inside there should be a very good reception, having very good chairs, and there's an LED presentation on the wall, very good drinking water. Everything we changed. Even the immunization room, cartoon should be painted on the wall, and there should be a breastfeeding room for the mothers, and that kind of things we applied, and we want to change. We decided to change, and we have converted. Now we have converted more than 600 primary health centers like that. Most modern hospitals, and most modern hospitals as not only the infrastructure, but very good laboratories also. We arranged very good laboratories to find out whether the people are diabetic or not, and other tests also. Other than this virus, etc., that cannot be tested in a rural laboratory. But very good equipments also we installed in the primary health center, the new family health centers. We started new clinics also to diagnose earlier some diseases. We have Shwas clinic, that is for chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, that is COPD. And each and every villages they can come to the family health center and check whether they have COPD or not. We supplied that equipment also there. And we started some clinics on mental health also, Ashwas clinic. If there any depression or that kind of mental issues, they can solve there. That counselors will be there, and counselors is there, and they are examining that. Early detection is the most important thing, and that we are arranging. We are converting the hospitals. Taluka level also, we supplied or we invested more than 50 crores in each and every taluk hospital. 50 crore means where we got that money? That is the most important question. We cannot get money from the 1% share of the central government in health sector. But we started this thing, KIFBI, Kerala Infrastructure Fund Board. From that, we got some money, 3,000 crores of rupees in health sector, and we distributed to the taluk level hospitals. And if you are coming to Kerala, please visit some of the taluk hospitals. Especially one hospital is completed fully, that is in Kollam district, Punalur Hospital. I'm inviting you to visit that hospital. I think you will definitely astonished on that, because that hospital is the same infrastructure or more than good infrastructure than the hospitals in rich countries. And you can experience that if we visit in the hospital, modular operation theaters and such kind of things there. And that way we are changing the primary health system. Our intention is to focus on the prevention. Prevention is better than cure. We are always raising that slogan, but we are doing nothing on that thing to prevention of the diseases. That is the most important thing. We are giving importance to prevention, and we are changing the primary health system to achieve that goal.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that answer. Next question is asked by Srijaya Singh. The state elections in Kerala happened during the surge of the second wave of COVID. What was its impact on Kerala? What measures were taken by the Kerala government to ensure that the social distancing norms were followed during the elections and the campaigning?
Yes, the election, that became a difficult thing in Kerala also. I think you know that in the first part, we were able to contain the virus properly, and we flattened the curve to the zero level in the first part, and we got appreciation throughout the world. And what is happening in Kerala, how can you achieve this result? They were asking the BBC, and all other medias also were focusing on that. And we flattened the curve, and we keep the mortality rate below 0.5%. All of them are asking how the sickly populated state. We have some challenges in front of us, in front of the pandemic. That the challenges is that even though we have very good human development index and very good primary healthcare system, everything here, but there are some bad first places also here. That is the prevalence of this non-communicable disease. We can say that lifestyle diseases. Now we have something to eat, but we are eating the not the good. We have no good eating style, or we are eating the instant food, etc. I think because of that habit, and without exercise, physical exercise, the non-communicable diseases are rampant in Kerala. The Kerala is known as the diabetic capital of India. and and also the thickly populated situation, that our population density is 860 out of 1 square kilometer. Our country's is 430 only in 1 square kilometer, but ours is 860 out of this 1 square kilometer. And that is a dangerous thing in front of a pandemic, you know. Yet we contained this thing through our strategic measures and activities. We put forward some strategies like break the chain campaign, SMS campaign, back to basis campaign, everything, to wear mask and also keep distance and use sanitizers, and very good quarantine, everything, watching whether they are keeping quarantine or jumping out of it. Everything was arranged here, and we have a very good result. But in the midst, the election came, and during that election period, we cannot run it properly. You know, all the political parties and other organizations want to some gatherings for election campaign, and they gathered, and there are some huge campaigns also. And after that, we anticipated that this will rise. The first wave, when the during that first wave, a first wave occurred in Kerala during 2020, November, October, November, that month. And the wave will occur definitely, because the virus is like that. We cannot put the virus in a nutshell, or virus we cannot stop it fully, but to restrict it. And we can we can kept a delay in peaking. That keeping it delayed peaking is the most important thing. Delayed peaking will provide us some breathing time to improve the health system. Our intention, Kerala's intention, is to keep the potential of virus under the health system resilience threshold. During that time, we were increasing our beds in the hospital, ICU beds in the hospital, and also these ventilators, etc. We were buying and installing in each and every hospital. We are arranging the CFLTCs, COVID first line treatment centers, second line, etc. We were working at that time. During that, in the first part, the delayed peak helped us very much. But in the second part, the second wave, because of this election, we didn't get time to act like that, and the peak occurred all of a sudden. And because of the earlier peak, we suffered very much. And but because of the preparation, pre-preparedness, all patients in Kerala got a bed in the hospital. No one was in the street. No one is in the fate that they are not getting a bed, an isolation bed, or oxygen, etc. Because of the election, the peak occurred, and the peak go up to 42,000 cases per day, like that. Now it is decreasing. It shows a downward trend. But one thing we have to note that the mortality rate that didn't increase more than 0.5%. That is because of our preparedness. But the election damaged these things. Our strict preparation and strict activities somewhat extend it loosened, and that is why the peak occurred all of a sudden. And we are also working on that nowadays also. Every day we are examining. The new minister and chief minister is examining each and every day. We have a system here that is strict evaluation and remedial measures. Each day we are examining, and transparency in reporting these things. Each and every day, the chief minister is conducting press meet and announcing these things to the public to make them aware of the state of the virus. What is the condition? What is the state? We are giving. Otherwise, misinformation or false information will dominate, and everything become upturned. And we are not allowing that. We are giving good information. This is the era of infodemics. We are saying so, and we are giving correct information to the people.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We have Pratyush Nigam with us. He would like to ask a question to you.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good
Ma'am,
evening.
what is the future of communism in contemporary Indian politics? As in, when should we expect a central communist government in the country?
I believe in communism and I want to be there, but we cannot predict anything, you know. That is a social change actually. If more people is aware of this thing, communism and socialism, they will take it. It will happen only through the public interest and public opinion. We cannot put communism all of a sudden in any place, any state or in center, etc. If more people want it, more people is aware about that, then it happens. The revolution will happen only through the struggle of poor people and only class and mass struggles. We believe like that, and we can wait for a time. I can only say that, right? But before we are attaining that or not, we can so many things. We can do to so many things in the current situation also, because in our constitution we are promising the poor people in India. What is the promise? Our country should be, our countries will be democratic, secular, and socialist. Our country is socialist country. That is written in our constitution. What is means socialism? Socialism means everyone should have to work according to their strength. Each and everyone should have to work wherever it is. Work for the country, social work for the society, and they can take whatever they want. That is socialism. And what is the fate of our country? Is socialism here? Is equality here? I first explained about democracy, you know, means perfect equality in opportunity. Is very perfect democracy is enjoying, people are enjoying perfect democracy in India? I can say no. In remote villages, they cannot enjoy democracy after the independence also. They have no equal right. They have no right to get education or get job. Get job. That is the what is the fate of the youth in India? The unemployment is coming, and and they are killing the poor people in India. What is the situation of the youths? And unemployment is increasing day by day. Why it is increasing? Because we should have to adopt some policy to reduce unemployment. The big corporates are there. Yes, they can work. But our priority, what should be our priority? That is for the poor people, and we have to arrange something for the poor people to get a job and get some livelihood. That should be the most important thing. And before we think in communism, communism is the last entity. We cannot say communism should come just after one day or like that. That will happen in some day or not. That doesn't matter. But we should have to act on socialism or good democracy. That is written in our constitution. And democracy, that is the first thing. We should provide equal opportunity to each and every situation in India. And communist, that doesn't means only communist government can give equal opportunity to the poor people. Even the alliance of the left or democratic alliance, they can provide good democracy if they want. They should have to change the attitude. That is not only Communist Party, no need to think like that, but also this kind of alliance or good democratic thinking that can provide a good livelihood for the poor people and good condition for their life. We should have to think from that thing, not communism.
Thank you so much, ma'am. On that note, how many more questions would you like to take?
How many?
More questions would you like to take?
Yeah, yeah, only 10 minutes more,
Okay, sure, ma'am. So next question is sent to us by Krishna Tiwari. Misinformation about allopathy is widespread. How to make people aware that all reagents, medical or not, have different effects on different people?
You asked about allopathy?
Yes, ma'am. I'll repeat the question.
Please, please.
Misinformation about allopathy is widespread. How to make people aware that all reagents, medical or not, have different effects on different people?
Yes, allopathy means modern medicine. The other name of allopathy is modern medicine. I think misinformation is not only about allopathy but also the indigenous medicine also. And some people are propagating against allopathy who are, as we previously mentioned, they are false belief, they have some false beliefs, and they are superstitious or like that. They are propagating against allopathy. Modern medicine is science based, and everything is preparing according to evidence based thing. But we can find that in every place there is a chance to error. In allopathy also there are, in some medicine, for some medicine there are some side effects, and some medicine is not proper, like that thing. But modern medicine is very much effective to save thousands of life in our era, in this century. And in previous centuries, we should have to examine before the advancement of allopathy or modern medicine, what's the fate? Thousands of people are succumbing to death due to this kind of pandemic or viral infections, etc. I think you heard about the Spanish flu, and at that time, thousands died due to Spanish flu, and also this chicken pox. And at that time, when the last previous century, there was no these preventive methods for or vaccination for this chicken pox, and thousands caught chicken pox, and they all succumbed to death on that. And when we find out or some vaccination, when we invented some medicines to prevent the this illness, and after that no one is dying, very few people are dying out of chickenpox. We can contain that thing. And now also COVID-19 is suddenly occurred, the SARS coronavirus 2, that belongs to corona family, that SARS and MERS virus, severe acute respiratory syndrome, and also the MERS, Middle East respiratory syndrome. That diseases is due to some coronavirus, and this thing also is from coronavirus. And at first there is no vaccination, there was no vaccination, and no preventive method, etc. We were frightened at that time in 2000, early 2020. We were frightened about that thing. But after 9 or 8 months, a vaccine was coming. Vaccine is coming now. Vaccine was invented, and several candidates are there for production of vaccine. Several types of vaccine are coming. We are not satisfied with the efficiency fully, but one day we will get more satisfied vaccine from the science world. And it is evidence based, and we should rely on that. And allopathy is there, science is there. Only science can provide solution is within the problem, but we should have to find out it. Only science can give a solution to these kind of things. And in indigenous medicine, there are also very good medicines from experience, and we are getting some traditional medicines also, and they are also, we should have to prove them in as evidence-based medicines, and we should have some research, etc. And very good traditional medicines are there, and the superstitious beliefs are opposing that things also. And there are some superstitions that we should not get vaccinated, and we should not use medicines. And some people are not using medicines at all. They are praying, and prayer, only through prayer we can reduce these things. They are thinking so. And in one church here in Kerala, also in one church, people gathered and have their prayers. And the people, all the people gathered, I think nearly 100 persons, they all got this virus. And from one or two men came there to pray, give their prayers, and from him or from them, all the people, most of the people got this COVID-19 virus and suffered very much. And I think 4 or 5 of them died also out of that. And that is the thing, not only allopathy, but the other part also. We cannot allow this kind of superstitious things, and we should have to believe that.
Thank you, ma'am. Last question is asked to us by Ashwati Menon. What should be the role of a welfare state vis-a-vis private healthcare providers, especially during a pandemic, in context of the exorbitant rates charged in the hospitals?
Yes, in this world, throughout the globe, the private hospitals become a place for profiteering and a business center. That should not be allowed. Private hospitals, we can allow private hospitals there because we can utilize them, that hospitals also in a crucial period like the pandemic or other such kind of situations. But the health is not a profiteering, should not be a profiteering business, and that should not be a commodity for profiteering. That is the main thing. And we should allow them to have some to fees or like that for this treatment. But it should not be exploitation. They cannot they cannot exploit the poor people out of that. In Kerala, we passed the Clinical Establishment Act. Not in Kerala, but also our central government passed the Clinical Establishment Act. Through that act, we can control this private sector, and we can ask them to register. Each and every private institutions should register under an act. We started in Kerala, we started that registration, and we should ask them to display the charges or fees and everything. They should have to display each and every hospitals, and they cannot charge triple or that kind of amount from the poor people. They cannot squeeze the poor people who were going there. The rich people can go to the private sector, and even the middle classes can go there for some extent. But the poor people cannot go. There is no need. If we improve the public health system, we can give good treatment, free treatment to all the poor people. In Kerala, we are implementing health finance assistance through insurance system, and more than 50 lakhs of people are getting the benefit. So the poor people, that means the poor people are getting completely free treatment from government hospitals. And the private sector, during the pandemic season, we called a meeting of this private sector, and we asked them to cooperate, and we asked them to open some COVID wards there, to share some beds for, especially for COVID-19 patients. And they cooperated with us, and that way we are making it that everyone should get a bed, and we are making sure we increase our bed strength that way also. We can utilize the private sector, but we should have a control on it. we should not allow them to increase the fees day by day or exploit the poor patients, etc. And that is the situation during the pandemic, and we should control through this act also, Clinical Establishment Act.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was truly an enlightening and interesting session, and it was an absolute honor and privilege for us to have you with us today. All the students of NUJS and especially the Malayali community have expressed a sincere gratitude to you for agreeing to have a session with us. On that note, I would request Hardik Batra to
Thank
deliver
you.
his thanks.
You all raised very good questions, and I don't know whether I answered satisfactorily. And, but you raised very good questions. It was a very good discussion, and thank you for raising such kind of questions, which is very much important in the contemporary days. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. I would request Hardik to have a vote of thanks.
A very good evening, ma'am. On behalf of the informal discussion group, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you for being with us in this session today. It was a privilege to have interacted with you, ma'am. And I hope everybody, each and every one of us who has attended this session would be taking something valuable from here. I would also take this opportunity to thank all the committee members and all the other participants who have asked such wonderful questions, making this session a success. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.